My friends, we have entered our 4th year of growing avocados in containers. And this year, there's 2 big differences. The first one is that we do have fruit now. We have ripening fruit on the tree that is actually ready to eat. Last year, we had forming fruit. We had flowers and fruit that started to grow on the tree. But this year, we actually have been eating fruit. Some is still ripening up that'll be ready pretty soon, and then some in the summertime as well. And the second, which is equally important, is drip irrigation. So now in the summertime, I don't have to come out and water the plants 3 times a day when it's 100 plus. I'm just gonna run the drippers like for 3 minutes at a time, every hour or so, once it gets super hot. And I just need to get one of those like fertilizer injector things to go with the drip system. And then we'll start growing some serious weed. Fruit trees. Anyway, let me recap on these trees that we have going on here. I have 5 trees that are 4 years old. They're all purchased at Laguna Hills Nursery, and they're all brocal trees. 4 of them are on Zutanos, and 1 of them is on Duke 7 rootstock. And they're all in 25 gallons, except for this one. This one's a surprise, and that's in a 20 gallon. And that one needs to go into a 25 gallon. But I'm dreading doing that because it's super heavy. It's a huge pain. Last year, they were 3 years old, and that was the year I decided that I would let them actually fruit, because you don't want to let avocados fruit when they're too small, because it kind of stunts their growth. They're either going to fruit or they're going to grow vegetatively. So, when they're younger, it's better to let them grow first. But it's really exciting to actually get fruit from the trees now after waiting for so long. 3 years of just watering and fertilizing is kind of old. But see, here on the surprise, it's got some fruit. The fruit is smaller than what I expected. I've seen some pretty big fruit. I'm gonna chalk that up just to it being in a pot and kind of a small tree. And I let it fruit a little bit too heavily. At this time, I do have fruit on all of the trees, so that's really exciting, all the 4th years. And then on the other side, I started another row the next year. So there's some trees that are on their 3rd year now. They're in 15 gallons, and they also need to be up-potted, but I've just been lazy about it. So as far as soil, everything is grown in top pot. I talk about top pot basically in every video. It's a mineral-based soil with peat moss. So it's peat moss, perlite, pumice, sand, and charcoal. With a mineral-based soil, your soil doesn't go anaerobic. You don't have to worry about overwatering, and you don't have to worry about root rot really. As long as you have some drainage, then the water is not going to sit there and rot out your plants. So most people fail growing avocados in containers, or just generally because they amend their soil with organic matter and compost or wood products, or just some type of bananas, food scraps. That works for some vegetables and some other trees as well, like guavas or feijoas. They don't mind that, but avocados absolutely hate having compost in the soil because they have a very high oxygen requirement. When it starts rotting and going anaerobic in that root zone, the plants can't take up the oxygen, or the avocados can't take up the oxygen, and they start declining, and they decline very quickly, and it's hard for them to recover too. They recover slowly. So definitely, when you're planting in the ground, you want to plant them in a mound a little bit, but definitely use a mineral-based soil, or one of those, something considered soilless or an inert soil. Something with peat moss is fine because it decomposes super slowly. I recently did a video on growing citrus in containers that goes over soil as well, and it's the same principle. So if you want to see that, you can take a look at it over here. I'll have a link in the description. So with fertilizer, I fertilize all my plants the same. I add Osmoco Plus once they get into the pot, and I sprinkle some organics in there. I don't really have any specific brand, whatever I bought on sale, as long as it has kind of the microbial life in there. And mycorrhiza helps too. And then every 5 or so months, I will add more Osmoco, because that's about the time that it starts to wear off, or just to be used up. And I'll add organics at the same time. And there are times where I used to add Jax 25, 515 every couple weeks, or every weekend when I was bored, just to kind of pump it up a little bit. At that time I was more focused on getting these things to grow as fast as possible. And at this point they're fruiting, so I'm not too concerned about vegetative growth as much as before. And I have not had problems with over-fertilizing. I've put on Jax every day just to see what happens, and there's not really any damage or any type of negative reactions. I found it to be hard to over-fertilize plants just generally, except for seedlings or really small young plants. Those have reacted kind of negatively. And it might be the salts, because all the fertilizers that I've used have been salt-based. So these 4 trees all started as brocal liners, these small little trees in orange bags that brocal grows. You can see they're generally around the same size. When I bought these trees, they were already put into 5-gallon containers. And when I was buying them, I was looking at the trunk size as well as the overall canopy. Bigger is better at that point, because they're all grown in the same year. So you're basically picking out the genetically superior ones or genetically more matched up ones. But you can see there's one tree that's significantly bigger. It's my Stewart. This one has some type of superior genetics involved in it, because this is also the same age, but this one filled out a 15-gallon in the same time the other ones were in 5 gallons. So there's a strategy when you're going to go buy your trees, because they're all the same age, but one is twice as big, and one provided me like 50 plus fruit on that Stewart. And then this Pinkerton over here next to me, you know, it's growing sideways more than vertically. It only gave me like 10 fruit. So don't just go buy any tree you see in Home Depot. And we like to start these trees small in the little liners because they're grown in peat moss and perlite, so it's perfect soil. And when you're choosing that, it's kind of the same type of strategy. Find the thickest trunk you can, and then with the most aggressive vegetative growth, because that is likely going to be more of a winner than, say, the smaller ones. All right, so let's talk about clonal rootstock. I have a reed on a Duke 7. That's my only clonal rootstock tree. So how they make these trees, they'll graft it like a normal tree, but they'll graft onto the rootstock tree, and they'll keep it in the dark, and then they will get that trunk to root out on the top. And that'll be the rootstock that's cloned. And then what they'll do is put some kind of ring or something on the bottom of this Zutano rootstock to choke it out so that it eventually dies, so you don't get like a sucker or something that takes over. So clonal rootstocks were chosen because they have specific characteristics that are more advantageous for growers, just general growers, I guess. And like Duke 7 is a special tree that has more cold resistance and more resistance to chlorosis. There's other ones like Dusa that's resistant to Phytophthora. Toro Canyon, there's also a rootstock that was like a lone survivor in a orchard infested with Phytophthora. The benefit of that is they are superior trees. You know that they have characteristics that you want, and also you have no genetic variation in your trees. So if you're growing in a commercial orchard, you know exactly what you're going to get and how they're going to grow. You know, you won't have something growing sideways like this one. Or something that grows too big, you know, like the Stewart I had. If you want to learn more about rootstocks, Brokaw has a website, and I will link that over there, and it just kind of talks about all the rootstocks that they sell, or all the trees that they sell in specific rootstocks. It's a good resource to learn more about it. So if clonal rootstocks are so good, then why is my reed over there so much smaller than the other ones that are in the same age? Because I have bare rooted that reed, because at the time, I don't know about now, but Brokaw had a lot of wood in the mix for their clonal rootstocks. And I was super paranoid from watching Gary's videos. I didn't want any organic matter in my root zone, so I cleaned it all off, and it took literally a year to come back and start growing again. So the difference with these smaller trees, they're growing in peat moss and perlite in those small liners, and that's perfectly fine. So you can just keep up-potting them over and over and over. And you can see this reed over here, I started it a year later, and it's basically bigger, and I have a couple fruit on it. Foliage is not doing as good as the one on Duke 7, but it is also in a smaller container, so it's hard to say how much better the clonal rootstock exactly is. So the question is, do you need clonal rootstock? And the answer is not really, but if you want it, it's not really a bad thing. It is a superior tree, but I just don't want to deal with the potential of the soil going anaerobic because of wood products. And I'm happy with picking out the bigger trees or the more aggressive growers. It's not like they're that much slower. You know, the Stewart is way bigger. So you'll be fine as long as you don't choose a dud. Because there are some of those trees that, for whatever reason, maybe the graft isn't good, or maybe the rootstock is inferior, has some genetic deficiencies or whatever, and they just never really grow. In that sense, you don't want one of those, and if you have a clonal rootstock, you definitely won't get that. So if you just choose strong trees, you should be fine. There are definitely very aggressive growers out there. And it's kind of like the one situation that I will buy a bigger tree, like a 15-gallon, over a 5-gallon or a liner, because you know it's going to be way faster growing than any of the other trees or any random tree you pick out. In terms of container sizes and materials, when I started gardening, I was very scared of root rot, especially with these avocados. So I got airbags because you get basically 360 degrees of aeration. And if you have a riser on the bottom, you get aeration underneath, so you won't have to worry about trees getting enough air. So the other upside with grow bags is that they don't get as hot as black plastic. Avocados don't like their roots getting baked. You will see damage from the sun when you up-pot them around the sunny side of the pot if there's no shade or protection. I see some growers like in Militaw, they will spray white paint on that side just so it won't get as hot as having black plastic baking in the sun. But the problem with grow bags, especially in the 25-gallon size or 20-gallon size, is that they're hard to move. You can't just tilt this on a dolly like you can with a 25-gallon pot. You can't lift it by yourself with just the straps. They're kind of wide and far apart. Grow bags also dry out easier because of the 360-degree aeration. You know, air is always going through, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you do need to water more. And if you have a drip system, then that's not something you need to worry about. You can just set your drip to water however you want. And trust me, it's not fun being out there watering 3 times a day in 110 degrees. In terms of pot size, I like to go from the liners straight to a 5-gallon because they do grow very fast and they will generally fill out that 5-gallon in 3 or 4 months or so. You might be able to leave it in there until the end of the year for the whole season. It definitely can go into a 15-gallon, or it can go into the ground after it's filled up that 5-gallon pot in 3 or 4 months. And my pot sizes, I go from 5, 15 to 25 because avocados grow pretty quickly and because I don't want to carry all these different pot sizes. I haven't gone any higher than 25 because I can't imagine up potting to like a 45-gallon. I was talking to one of the commenters that he had a 45-gallon that he moved into a 200-gallon pot. It was a big fuerte. So you definitely can keep them moving. So my steward is definitely root bound, so we will have to deal with that this year. I'm going to have to root prune. Definitely not looking forward to that, but it has to be done this year. The tree's just too big. They could probably all benefit from it, but I think I'll let the other ones slide for 1 more year. And I'm coming to this realization, or just this conclusion, that 25-gallon is the size you want to be at to get a decent harvest. I have trees in the 15 gallons. We'll leave a couple to see how they do and if they fruit more this year. There's just not enough roots to support much fruit growth. In terms of maintenance, I've basically just let them grow. I haven't done much pruning because there's not much excessive growth. Sometimes I will have a branch grow too much one way, and then I will pinch the tip or cut a little bit off the tip to promote side branching. But you do need to watch out for water sprouts. I had 3 water sprouts growing out lower down on my straw wheel, and I thought that was just side branches, so I was pretty happy because I wanted it to grow out further on the bottom. But those turned out to be water sprouts, which are basically new trunks. And you don't want to have competing trunks, especially on a tree the size of mine, which are in pots. So I like to leave growth lower down on the bottom to give the avocado a skirt. And this is typically done to make sure the moisture stays inside under the tree, in the soil, in the roots, because avocados definitely like to have their roots moist. If you go inside an avocado tree, you just see leaves all on the floor and then, you know, the skirt around it. And that's keeping the moisture in, you know, acting like a mulch. You're not getting direct sun onto the roots either, which can cause them to stress out. So out of all the trees I've had, the avocados were the only ones that really truly suffered any damage during the heat wave at 110 degrees. And the damage started showing over time. So the first day I didn't see much burn or anything, so I thought everything was fine. But I slowly saw the burn starting to show on the branches, and it would just get darker and darker and darker. So it's something you should be aware of over time, that you can't just react to the heat. You need to be proactive and deal with protecting the tree before the heat comes. So things you can do, you can put some shade over top. I was too lazy to do that. Or you can spray with kale and clay or that Ivy Organic stuff. I know kale and clay is way cheaper. You can get like a 50-pound bag for, I don't know, like $60 or something. You can spray the exposed branches so that they won't get burned from the sun. Definitely do it before it gets hot. So we'll take a look at the specific trees, give you an idea of the variation and how differently these trees grow. So first up are the 4 years. This is the reed on Duke 7. It is very heavily supported because after bare rooting, it was floppy and unhappy and didn't grow well for a year. This is about as tall as it is compared to the Stewart right here. Stewart is way bigger, and last year it had a lot of fruit and also had a lot more foliage. Here's a difference in the trunk sizes. It's hard to see, but here. This only goes around here. I can't even get my hand around this one. It's more than 3 times as big, or 3 times as thick. The reed on Duke 7 does have 1 fruit, 2 fruits. This is a bigger one. Reed takes about, I think it's ripe around June, July, they say. Next is Pinkerton here, and Surprise on this side. Surprise took some sun damage and seems to be more droopy after that because it was just too hot, you know, in 110 degrees. And the pot is smaller, so I think it didn't get enough moisture in the other trees. And it's kind of hard to tell, but Pinkerton is really short because it grows out sideways like this. When I bought this tree, I bought it because it had a thick trunk and it was going this way. And I discussed with Gary, I was like, what do you think, Gary? Should I cut this off? He's like, no, they'd be good fruiting branches. And they have, you know, where's my fruit? You know, they're fruiting up here. But it's just really annoying having a sideways growing tree, you know, like I would much prefer one that grew straight up. This is a leaf bud. Pinkerton last year had flowered 3 times, back to back to back. So it was basically naked for the longest time. These are flower buds. This is the same Pinkerton tree. This is the Charwell. This is my oldest tree, and it has about 10, 15 fruit. The fruit is small. You know, I have a smaller Charwell tree that does have bigger fruit, but it only has like 1 or 2. So this one had about 30, maybe more. And once it started getting a little bit warmer, it would just slowly drop more and more fruit. And that's kind of normal for avocados. You do end up with a lot of sacrificial fruit that doesn't make it to ripeness. It'll kind of drop, and then get to a point where you can sustain whatever's left and they just stay on. Unless you get some kind of excessive wind or something like that, that might just knock them off. That's it for the 4th year trees. Go on and take a look at the 3rd year trees in 15 gallons. So if you take a look, they're basically the same size. They're pretty close to each other. You know, they're like kind of like this, around my height, like 8 feet. No, I'm just kidding. There's small differences if you look up close, so I'll show you what they look like. This one's Don Galogli. It was growing very straight. It has a little bit of chlorosis, and I think it's because this one is grown too aggressively and it needs to get up-potted. So right now it is flowering, and this yellow in the leaves could be just the leaf cycle. Avocados typically will just shed all their leaves at some point. You know, all these old leaves will eventually drop, and then new leaves will come, and it's about this time of the year that happens. So let's hope for the best, but it is too big for the pot. You can see what I mean when I'm talking about with the leaves in here. Like, these leaves will kind of shed all the salt that's in the tree, and then these leaves will drop, and it's the normal cycle of the trees. This is Gem. Gem usually stays pretty small and is very productive. This one is my 2nd reed, and I bought this to compare whether it was worth bare rooting a clonal rootstock or just to start a seedling. And this is why I came to the conclusion that you should just grow a seedling or just pick a good one and then roll with it. If you don't choose a dud, they do grow pretty fast. This is basically as tall or taller than the one on Duke 7, and it's in a 15 gallon rather than a 25 gallon container. But one thing to note is that the tree on Duke 7 does not have this issue with the salt, you know, pushing out through the leaves. You know, there is benefits to it. When I bought my first Charwell, I thought it was growing kind of slow. So I went to go pick up another Charwell the next year to compare the rate of growth. And it is a little bit slower, but I think it is also a rootstock issue. So I don't really sweat it too much anymore, you know, like whether one is growing a little bit faster or slower than the other one. As long as they just grow and they don't die and make fruit. And this Charwell does make full size fruit. There's, I don't know, two on here. Excited for that. And this is the last one. This is the Jan Boyce, and I put it in a 15 gallon recently. Here you can see some leaf buds right next to some flower buds. It's looking like asparagus or something. So those are the trees, and let's try one of these surprise avocados. Well, it turns out they're not ready. Okay. It's been a few days and I'm back, and I got the right hat on now too. But this is one of my surprise, and we'll do a taste test now. It's got a nice seed to flesh ratio. Rem does good taste testing videos on how he evaluates fruit, but I'm just gonna eat it. It's a little more watery than expected, but it's good. I like it. Well, I'm Lucas. This is Grows Gone Wild. Thanks for watching.
Grows Gone Wild. That's what they call me. I'm the man with a plan, growing naturally. From the dirt to the table, it's a beautiful sight. Yeah, it grows gone wild. We're living it right.